Hi, my name's Chad. Tom, thanks for the intro. Perfect segue into what I want to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about the problem set that we've been addressing and also how we're seeing the market shape over time and how Iron.io is evolving to address the market. So first of all, perfect segue. How many engineers are in this room right now? Almost the entire room. That's awesome. How incredible is it to be an engineer right now? The world loves us. It's so cool. And this is a manifestation of how important that software has become in the world. The rise of the developer, it's having an impact on every part of our life, from self-driving cars to self-shipping drones to pills that you can swallow that automatically send health data to your mobile phone, to agriculture sensors that take water and temperature checks to automatically change the amount of fertilizer that goes into the crops. It's incredible. It's driven by software and hardware, which is really cool to see Heavybit also enter into the hardware space, which is really cool how those things amalgate together. But I think the Oscar award-winning Steve Ballmer said it best: developers, developers, developers. We need to empower developers for our organizations to stay agile and to be innovative today. Really, it's innovate or die is what it comes down to, because software is so prevalent in today's society. But what do they really want? Developers want to write code. They want their tooling to get out of the way. They want freedom from infrastructure. Now, we all like to press things and we all like to see the bells and whistles fly, but it's sort of like an artist having to create their canvas, or an author having to bind the book together and deliver it to, well, Barnes & Noble's gone now, but whoever's next in line. We don't want to have to be dealing with the stuff underneath an abstraction layer. We want to create software. We want to write our poetry. I mean, that's what I used to love doing at 5 a.m. every morning when no one else was around, just create software and not have to talk to anybody. Well, fortunately now I get to the pleasure of running a company and talking to everybody and not writing as much code, but those are the moments that make us happy. So we want self-service. And I think really that's what we're addressing as developer-facing companies or APIs, is we're helping developers become more self-service. Today's application, though, is primarily asynchronous. And what I mean by that is over 50% of the workload that is running, or the clock cycles that are running, happen in the background and asynchronously out of the user loop. So when I go to a website and I click on checkout, it returns thank you. That's 5% of the work. 95% of the work went to the quote-to-cash process, went to the shipping process, went to the ERP systems and the CRM systems, the analytics systems. There's a flow to all of that data and all those processes. The problem, though, is those async workloads typically don't have very good tooling around them. We've done a great job. I mean, Heroku is an incredible company that helps provide the compute power, but you still need open source frameworks, and you need other queues, you need messaging middleware, you need a whole plethora of things to help with that asynchronous flow. That's the problem space that Iron.io is helping or addressing, is that asynchronous flow of processing and communication. The announcement I want to make today, well, we've sort of announced it a few times and sprinkled it here and there, is that we're supporting Docker more and more. You can't go a single presentation. I think I talk about Docker at least 15 times a day. We want to be able to support the workflow of the developer, not create the workflow. And that's where Docker comes in for us. This was our workflow before this DockerWorker workflow. Essentially, what we did is the developers would write a worker, and they would build it locally, and then they would deploy it to the Iron platform, and then they would test it. So they would queue it or they'd schedule it, and something would happen, and it would return some response. And if it failed, they'd have to go back, and they'd build it again, and they'd ship it again, and they'd test it again, and then eventually they'd get a monitor and scale it once in production. And then when they want to do more work, they have to go back through that entire process. That process, though, typically, if you want to change a single line of code, can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Because there's shipping that to our platform and running it and getting a result, it takes time, because we're a cloud service. And there's all these things taking place, like library loading and dependencies and all this other stuff. What we've done, though, is because we are just running Docker now under the hood, you can take that same Docker container and run it locally, which means that your iteration to development and testing and deploying shrinks down to seconds from minutes. So now our developers can create software, can write their workers, can test them locally, and do this in a very, very quick iteration, deploy it to our platform only once it's ready to actually scale and manage. But what's even cooler is that now that everyone is embracing this idea of Docker, or whether it's Rocket or whatever the next container system is, if we're all speaking the same container, then we can introduce other services into the workflow. Circle CI is sitting here in the audience today. He'll be speaking after me. We want to work with them on having the workflow for our developers to be able to develop, test, run continuous integration, and deploy to production, all within the workflow the developer wants to be embracing. We don't want to dictate that. We don't want to be prescriptive. We want them to be able to work with the workflow that they love. So a quick demo. I didn't want to do a live demo because this stuff gets a little hairy. But essentially, the way that it works is we simply run, the top is some boilerplate Docker code. In fact, we can actually just alias that so that we're not running that Docker command every time. But if you look, we have our own Ruby 2.1 stack. And that Ruby 2.1 stack is just an Ubuntu container, which then tells that Ubuntu container to mount into, we mount our code in the worker directory, so the current directory into the worker directory in that Ubuntu container, and then we're going to run ruby hello.rb, which is just a very simple one-line command that runs a Ruby script inside that container. The beauty, though, is that container runs exactly on our platform, or on your local computer, as it does on our platform. So it completely removes the barrier to this development workflow. Once it's ready, you simply zip it up and send it over to our platform. You can use our CLI tool to send it over, or you can just basically upload it through our API in any way. Once it's on our platform, you can call create, which queues up the task, or you can schedule it. And what our platform does is you can queue it up or schedule it a million different times, and we take care of the workflow, the distribution across all the servers, the management, the error monitoring, the alerting, and all the other stuff that you need from a queue system. We do that for you. Here's what the interface looks like once you're managing it inside the interface. This is a set of tasks that just ran. There's 4 of them that ran. You can get out all the information from it. We have a nice UI that wraps around it. But the key, though, is that now that we have these stacks, we can support this workflow where we are just another part of the developer's workflow. So our job as a developer service is to get out of the way and allow the developers to be empowered for self-service. So that is it. If you want to get started, you can try dev.iron.io or go to our blog. We have a blog post that describes the whole DockerWorker workflow. Next up for us is actually supporting your own custom Docker images rather than just our set of pre-described 14 Docker images. Stay tuned for that. Thanks.